Trini Good Media is the idea or the brainchild of Franka and Ardene Sirjoo. We're very happy to have both of them join us for us to have a conversation about TGM. And Franka, we start off with you after saying good evening, ladies. But I find the name in and of itself is, I like it. I find it's very provocative. So give me a little idea, a little overview about what Trini Good Media is about, please.
Okay, well, DK, thank you for having us. First of all, let people know that I am a journalist. I have been a journalist for almost 25 years. And I'm what people call a senior journalist. I'm not heading into veteran status as yet, but senior. And so when I was contemplating leaving my last place of employment, which was The Guardian, I was there as a features editor for 5 years before that. I had decided I wanted to do more audio-based products because audio is my favorite medium. I love radio dramas and that kind of thing. So I was really keen to get some stuff started in that area. And I knew I'd be ahead of the curve because we didn't have much of it happening in Trinidad as yet. So I was trying to get a name and I kind of bounced some ideas off people. And one person said to me, there's a perception that the media in Trinidad is not very good. And I said, well, no, we have a lot of very hardworking journalists in Trinidad, and I am one of them. And I think, okay, well, Trini Good Media, let's do that. And I asked some very critical people, and they seemed to like it. Ardene liked it especially, and so that's where we went, Trini Good Media. But our aim actually in the name and in the product is to make sure that the things we do are of a particular level, of a particular standard, and that we are always looked at as good media. That's what our Trini Good Media stands for.
And Ardene, what are some of the things that you all have done? Because I tune in from time to time, but at the same time, we can talk about that a little later. What are some of the things that Trini Good Media has under its belt thus far?
Okay, well, we started off by doing a podcast, a season of a podcast called Talk About Us. And what that did was delve into society and culture in Trinidad and Tobago. And we looked at things like sport, we looked at culture. We are particularly interested in culture and society. If we do crime and politics, it's definitely not going to be in a straight newsy way. We always thought of doing it like kind of news features or features. So we did a podcast, a season of a podcast. We did some private commissions for Code, which is a publishing company in Canada. And one of our big assignments was last year for Carrie Festa, where we ran the official online radio station for Carrie Festa, Festival Radio. So we've taken the Festival Radio model and we've also done it for Carnival. We just also completed a series about Pat Bishop that the National Gas Company commissioned. And there are a few other things on now, and especially next week, we're starting a training course in podcast taking from here.
And don't say anything more about that podcast workshop as yet, because we want to talk about that in just a bit. But Ardene, I want to bring you into the conversation. And Franka started off by saying that she's a senior journalist. Both of you have media experience. What are some of the differences that you see off of the bat when you think about the differences between more traditional types of media, radio, print, television, and podcasting? Ardene?
Well, I have to say, I've been working in radio for about 12 years, and I've had a lot of freedom in the network where I've worked to do a number of things. I can't say, a lot of people think about the media as this place where there's so much interference and people tell you what to say and you don't have any liberty. But I can't say I've ever experienced that. And so gratefully, I think what the digital space did was just reinforce this idea of having the freedom to explore things, but having the freedom more so this time around to explore them more deeply. And in the way that we don't have to think about commercial imperatives. And not that money is not important, and not that we don't want to be viable and sustainable and all those wonderful things, but we are not driven primarily by that. And so that shapes a lot of what we are able to put out and what we are interested in as well. So it's not just about meeting what we think a public out there wants or what we think a sponsor or advertiser wants to hear, but it's really what we think people want to hear based on the people we know and based on the interests that we know people have and the appetite that people have for really good quality content. So one of the things Franka probably just forgot to mention was the Over the Hump series we started during lockdown, which was our online radio show every Thursday for 10 weeks. Well, we did two shows. One was a music show on a Sunday evening, and the other one was on a Thursday evening, Over the Hump, which is more current affairs. But it was current affairs in the context of the whole COVID lockdown experience. So we explored a number of areas: food, wellness, events, various sectors that have been affected, of course, by the pandemic and the restrictions that have since been put in place, and the fallout from that, but also what are the opportunities that people have found. And one of the most compelling, I think, episodes we did was about Black Lives Matter. And while that is something that originated in the US, of course, we saw that it had quite an impact in terms of how it resonated. So for us, having the freedom in the digital space to do the things that we feel matter, the things that we think we need to respond to as members of the media, and again, not just driven by a different kind of interest, I think that's one of the key differences.
Now, Ardene, you spoke about, you mentioned the word freedom twice, and we have about just under 3 minutes before we go to break. So, Franka, I want to go back to you. And freedom, Ardene says that she has experienced a level of freedom in traditional media. But how free are you to say, okay, well, we're going here, this is what we're going to talk about? Because Ardene also spoke about the fact that you're able to follow your interests as opposed to saying, okay, well, we think these are the things that will appeal to some people. So how do you go about deciding, okay, this is what we're going to have a conversation about? Because listening to the podcast, I know that, Franka, you love food, different types of food, you love music, culture. These things come out overtly. How do you go about saying, okay, well, this is the topic that we're going to tackle for this podcast?
Well, I think what we do first is we look at the landscape, and we try not to be overly led by the trends, because something that can become trendy a lot of times it often has very little substance. So we look at things that are substantial. So for example, one of the things that we did with Talk About Us, we did a special strand for Carnival 2019 called the re-release, where we spoke to soca artists of now and some older ones like Rudder, for example. And we talked about their relationship to their music. And that is something that is an ongoing thing. That's something that would never be time sensitive. We can bring that back now and it would still have great resonance. So it's things like that. We often look at things like true crime. True crime is a really huge podcast genre in the rest of the world. And I know some people here who love to listen to true crime. And we're thinking, well, you know what? There are a lot of crimes that happen in our time. Well, I know Ardene might have been too young for some of it, but, you know, there are some names that have legends. So, for example, the Beast of Beach, or Voice Thing, or some of these people that nobody virtually knows about now under a certain age. And so it's things like that that we think about that would have value for people of a certain age and would give some education and a little bit of entertainment to people under a certain age as well. So that's how we look at it.
I know somebody actually mentioned the name Mano Benjamin in conversation recently, so it's very interesting that you bring that name up. But we take a break and come back with so much more. We are speaking with Franka Phillip and Ardene Sirjoo of Trini Good Media. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking with Franka Phillip and Ardene Sirjoo about Trini Good Media. And ladies, in a little bit, we'll ask you to give some information as to where people can get on to TGM. But Ardene was speaking about being, feeling a sense of freedom working with the radio or the traditional media that you did. Now, it's one thing to say, okay, well, I'm free to talk about this and that's good. Does it feel liberating, or is there a bit of pressure to have all of the decision, if not most of the decisions, with regard to this medium that you all are dealing with right now?
No, I've never felt pressure with respect to deciding on what to speak about. It's not any more liberating than perhaps what I would do on radio, except that I have more control, or we have more control over this time. So for instance, I still do radio. But again, because there are commercial interests attached to that, because we have to be paid, there's a whole facility to run and operations cost to cover. we always give way to people who have something to sell. So in a sense, you often, especially like you can imagine in the lead up to general election, you often have very little control over the time that you're allocated. So yes, I may have a 2 hour show every Wednesday, but sometimes that can be half hour, and my entire show, if I have something planned, can be derailed. So in that sense, I definitely feel a lot more control and I appreciate that. I think the only thing I remember when we did festival radio for Carifesta and even for Carnival, the thing that was most unnerving was being entirely responsible for the tech. So that if it didn't work, well, it was all on you to figure it out. And even in the case of Carifesta, we had a sound team working with us. Ultimately, it's still you, right? Because you're the person contracted to do this.
Yeah.
You have to answer questions if it doesn't work. And so that's the only pressure I think I have felt, and maybe Franka, you as well.
Yeah, I think it was a learning curve for us to have to do everything time, but it was something that we took away a lot of the lessons from, and that's why we're able to do the live radio stuff on our own now. I mean, we sit here and we could do a show now.
Yeah. I mean, of course, again, because remember during lockdown, everybody was home, right? So there were a couple of times our neighbors decided to do work on their home, whatever construction, repairs, etc. And that could filter into your show, and or it could even prevent or preclude your show from time to time. So those are the things over which we have very little control operating in a non-studio environment. But typically, I think we enjoy the brainstorming about the many different things to talk about. And every day there's a new idea. There's never a shortage of ideas. It's really sometimes as well the capacity to execute because we have so many things going on already so that our personal projects, the things that are dearest and nearest to our hearts, those are the things that sometimes get left behind in a bid to make the business operate like a business, right? So balancing that can be tricky, but we're learning and hopefully eventually, but the intention is to expand and build out a team so that we can in fact execute various things at the same time.
Now, I find you all are kind of glossing over Carifesta, and I want to take a little break, take a little pause. And this is not a question, it is a comment. I really appreciated being able to tune in and have conversations with people from the region. And that sense of connection was something that felt very pure. And I think is something that's necessary because sometimes we can treat each other a certain way. This is in a country or in the region because we don't know about each other. And so many times there are things that are similar. We may call it a different name, but at the same time, we have common and we have similar experiences and we just need a bridge. And you all were that for Carifesta, so I thank you. But jumping off my soapbox and not even allowing you all time to respond to that because I want to talk about the workshop. You all have a workshop that you're planning. Yep. You just spoke about having the capacity to execute, Ardene. Franka, what is this workshop about and what are you all trying to execute with it?
Okay, well, the workshop is called You Can Make a Podcast. And so what it's supposed to be, it's a 3-part workshop where at the end of it, participants will have the solid basics so that they can actually go off on their own and make their own podcast. You might not be able to make the daily, as the New York Times is making. You might not be able to do overly ambitious things, but you would be able to have the level of competence that you can actually do just a basic general, whatever most podcasts are, conversational, interview-based podcasts, right? And of course, people who want to learn more, we will be guided by what people are asking, and we will offer that in the future. But we've always considered, I have always been very strong about training. And I worked at the BBC for 8 years, and I have to say, one of the things that I really, really was grateful for at the BBC was access to do training about anything. I didn't have to stick with radio or online or whatever because that's where I would. If I wanted to go and learn about camera operations, I could go and do it. And so to me, it is actually quite frustrating to see and to understand the kind of lack of training opportunities that journalists here have. And I think, unfortunately, because of that lack of training, people have been open to criticism because sometimes it's not that they're bad, they just don't know any better. And you can only do so much as an editor, but I think we definitely need to invest more in training our journalists. So that, I guess that was my little soapbox um, there. But I think what we want to do is give people the opportunity over the 3 sessions. The first session is about ideation, which is going to tell you about how to develop an idea for a podcast, developing your brief, understanding what you're trying to achieve. The second part is instructional. We have a trainer from the UK who is going to go through Audacity, which is one of the main programs that independent podcasters use out there. And we're going to also have a very interesting little session on interview tips by Laura Dorrich of Loop Caribbean, our own Laura Dorrich. And in the third day, we're going to have one of the masters of sound design in the podcast with Mr. Ian Cost. He's going to give a nice overview of sound design. He's going to give you some examples from some of the podcasts and some of the documentaries he's made. He's a Herbert L. Murrow Award winner, and that is like winning an Oscar in the sound world. And I'm very, very happy to have him. And to top off the workshop, we have a Trini American. We have Nyla Boodoo. She is the host of a podcast called Axios Today. If you know, Axios is a relatively new news website, and Axios, their thing is about brevity. And they're the same site with Jonathan Swan, who interviewed Donald Trump a few weeks ago, and that interview where he was revealed to know what he didn't know what he was talking about, and Jonathan was that guy from Axios. So Nyla was very excited to be involved in something Trinidadian. Her parents are Trinidadian, but she was born in the States, but she's always very keen. And that's one of the things about all the facilitators that we have on board for this course. I didn't mention that we had Tony Phillips and Mel Harris, who are both UK-based, but both have Caribbean antecedents.
Now, you're dropping some bombs there, Franka, but at the same time, with just over a minute more, Ardene, tell me about the pricing, because there's something I saw interesting about the pricing scheme, and how do people contact you for more information or to log on? But we have just 1 minute more.
Sure. So if you're interested in doing the first module only, which is the one with Mel Harris and Tony Phillips, which looks at ideation, it's $300. And if you want to do the entire course, you actually get it for $3,500. The entire course, as Franka mentioned, it consists of 3 modules. You can find out more at TriniGoodMedia.com. That's our website. And of course, follow us on our socials at Trini Good Media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And you can also email us at festivalradiott@gmail.com.
So we're looking forward to that and looking forward to good things, because and there's someone I know who says you don't put a stethoscope on somebody and tell them operate, but at the same time, plenty of people want to put headphones on people and say, go, you're a journalist.
Yeah.
But that is what it is at this point in time. But thank you for being part of the course to correct that. Franka, Philip, and Ardene, Sirjoo. And we also want to thank you for tuning in this evening. On behalf of the entire news team, have a good night.